Across the shifting sands of time, there rises a vision, an empire not written in ink, but carved in blood and forged in stone. Its walls stood against the fury of men and nature alike, while its banners cast shadows across the known world. Yet behind every towering monument lies a tale of sacrifice, cruelty and ambition, the story of an empire that sought to be eternal. Listen closely, for in the quiet hum of history there beats a thunderous heart. The heart of empires, of rulers who once believed themselves gods, of men who shaped destiny with the edge of their swords. When we speak of greatness, we must never forget its first ingredient, blood. It is blood that stains the birth of every empire, red rivers flowing into the stones of forgotten battlefields. And it is here, in this crucible of fire and iron, that an empire of blood and stone first came alive. From the dawn of civilization, the earth trembled beneath the march of warriors. Farmers became soldiers, fathers became killers, and sons were torn from the cradle to be offered to the cause of power. This was no gentle beginning, it was a storm. Spears clashed, shields splintered, cries of the fallen echoed through valleys that had never before heard the roar of conquest. The empire did not emerge from silence, it erupted in violence. Imagine the scene. A young commander, eyes burning like twin flames, leading his army across foreign soil. The air thick with the smell of iron and sweat, the ground painted crimson. Each step forward brought not with diplomacy, but with the beating drums of war. Those who resisted were crushed beneath sandaled feet, and those who submitted bent their necks in trembling silence. In this world, mercy was weakness. Strength alone carved dominion. The empire's architects were not masons but warriors. Their foundation was not mortar but blood. Their walls were raised upon the backs of the conquered. Men and women, once free, were dragged into chains, their lives fueling the ambitions of emperors who proclaimed destiny as their right. And yet, for all its cruelty, it was this relentless pursuit of power that forged unity, that bent chaos into order. In the brutality of conquest lay the seeds of civilization itself. There is a terrible beauty in such beginnings. To stand at the threshold of empire is to witness a paradox. The noblest ideals born from the darkest deeds. Honor, loyalty and courage all wrapped tightly around the unspeakable cost of lives extinguished. The empire's first breath was a gasp taken over the corpses of its enemies. It demanded sacrifice, and the world answered. But do not think these were nameless shadows of history. Each soldier who fell beneath the sun carried dreams, hopes and stories that would never be told. Each scream on the battlefield was a voice extinguished, each life poured into the soil so that an empire could rise. The stones of its roads were slicked with sweat, the foundations of its palaces laid upon bones. The empire may have been remembered for its triumphs, but it was born from grief. And yet, there is something unyielding, something undeniably human in this, for within the violence lay an unstoppable will. The belief that through conquest, through domination, through sheer unrelenting force, one could create something eternal. It was a statement, a declaration that man could defy the boundaries of his world and shape it with his own bloodied hands. This is how it began, with swords raised toward the sky, with drums echoing like thunder across vast plains, with the relentless march of men who believed they could bend time itself to their will. The empire was not gifted by fate, it was seized. It was taken in the name of power and its foundation carved in the most enduring currency of all, blood. And so, as the smoke of battle cleared and silence fell across the scarred earth, the empire stood. Not as a monument to peace, but as a warning that greatness, true greatness, is never born without cost. It was here, in this violent genesis, that the empire of blood and stone drew its first breath. And when the rivers of blood had run their course, when the clash of steel gave way to silence, the victors turned their gaze to stone. For conquest alone was never enough. What is power if it does not endure? What is triumph if it fades like smoke on the wind? No, the empire demanded permanence, was carved into the very earth itself. From the rubble of war rose monuments so vast they defied imagination. Towering walls, glistening temples, arches that framed the heavens, all conjured not merely to inspire awe, but to command obedience. Each stone was a message. We are eternal. We cannot be undone. Picture the scene. Legions of men, their backs bent under the weight of quarried stone, dragging blocks across dust and heat. The whip cracked, the sweat poured, and still the labour continued. These were not gentle creations, but colossal structures built upon human endurance. Every column was a testament to ambition, every foundation laid upon the crushed hands of the forgotten. The people bled for their rulers once more, this time not on the battlefield, but beneath the weight of stone. Cities were born from this vision. Roads stretched like veins across the empire, binding provinces into a single beating heart. Palaces glimmered in the sunlight, their marble facades reflecting the pride of kings and emperors. And towering above all, statues carved in the likeness of rulers, faces frozen in eternal defiance of time. They stared down from their pedestals, daring future generations to forget the hands that built this world. But stone is more than a symbol, it is a weapon. A fortress could repel armies long after soldiers had fallen. A wall could outlast the memory of those who raised it. The empire knew this. Its rulers sought not only to govern the living, but to chain eternity itself. Where blood had forged power, stone preserved. Together they formed an unbreakable pact, violence and permanence, cruelty and grandeur. And yet within the shadow of these monuments lay a hidden truth. The stones that dazzled the eye were polished by suffering. The hands that lifted them often belonged to those who would never walk their grand roads, never pray beneath their temples, never rest beneath their arches. To the empire, the common man was a tool, his sweat and bones as necessary as mortar. His reward was not glory, but survival. Still, there is something haunting in these legacies. For even as centuries pass, even as empires crumble, the stone remains. We can walk among the ruins today, touch the very same carvings once unveiled to crowds of trembling subjects. And in those stones of the past speak louder than any book, louder than any king. They remind us that human ambition does not die. It is merely buried in dust, waiting to be uncovered. Thus the empire of blood became also an empire of stone. It clothed its violence in majesty, its cruelty in marble, and in doing so it secured a place not only in history but in eternity. Though blood dries and kings fade, the monuments endure. They are the empire's voice across time, cold, silent, unyielding, whispering to us still, we were here. We were mighty, we will never be forgotten. But beneath the gleam of stone and the roar of triumph, there lay another story, one that the rulers never inscribed upon their monuments. For every shining temple, every towering wall, every victory carved into the annals of history, there was a price. And that price was paid not by the emperors who basked in glory, but by the countless souls whose names were lost in silence. The empire's greatness was never free. It was bought in the currency of flesh and bone. In the streets, slaves toiled under the weight of impossible burdens, their backs breaking so that marble might rise higher, so that kings might feast longer. In the fields, peasants sowed grain, not for their own children's mouths, but for legions that marched endlessly across foreign soil. And in the ranks of the army, men stood shoulder to shoulder, knowing that tomorrow's dawn might be their last, their lives exchanged for the expansion of borders they would never see. The emperors celebrated their victories with parades, golden chariots rolling triumphantly through avenues lined with cheering crowds. But what the eyes of the crowd could not see was the human wreckage left behind, the widows who waited for husbands who would never return, the children who grew fathered, their futures buried on distant battlefields, the broken men discarded after war, their usefulness gone, their sacrifices unremembered. Glory demands sacrifice, but here the sacrifices were not shared equally. The rulers immortalized themselves in stone, while the common man vanished into dust. It was the sweat of the laborer that raised the colossus. It was the blood of the soldier that painted the empire's banners. It was the silence of the oppressed that allowed emperors to declare themselves gods. The empire thrived not upon justice, but upon imbalance, a pyramid where the suffering of the many upheld the power of the few. And yet, perhaps this was the empire's most seductive illusion, the promise of glory, for even those who suffered whispered of greatness. Even those who starved clung to the belief that their sacrifice gave meaning to something larger, something eternal. To fight for the empire was to fight for immortality, If not one's own, then the immortality of the land, the people, the dream. It was a promise so powerful that men willingly offered themselves to the altar of ambition. But listen closely, and the stones themselves tell the truth. Their cracks are not only the result of time, but of strain of countless hands that bore the impossible, the strain of countless souls that were extinguished so that the empire might shine brighter. For all its power, its majesty, the empire was a machine of hunger. It consumed lives as fuel, feeding its own insatiable fire. And here lies the terrible beauty of it all. The very suffering that crushed so many gave rise to wonders that still dazzle us today. We marvel at the ruins, yet rarely ask whose bones lie beneath them. We speak of emperors with awe, yet forget the countless unnamed who built their thrones. The empire's glory is undeniable, but so too is its cost. This is the truth the rulers dared not speak, but history remembers. The empire of blood and stone was never simply a monument to greatness. It was also a graveyard. A graveyard for dreams, for lives, for generations sacrificed at the altar of ambition. And as the banners waved, as the drums of triumph echoed through its marble halls, the empire whispered a quiet truth to those who listened. Glory is never free. It's always paid for in blood, in suffering, in silence. And yet, for all its power, for all its majesty, the empire could not escape the one enemy that no sword could pierce, no wall could repel, no monument could defy: time itself. For time is the great conqueror, and even the mightiest empire, born in blood, crowned in stone, was destined to crumble. The emperors proclaimed themselves eternal. They believed their bloodlines would stretch across centuries, that their names would echo forever through marble halls. They raised palaces that kissed the heavens, carved inscriptions into the hardest stone, and declared, "We are unbreakable." But the world has no mercy for such pride. Slowly, silently, the cracks began to appear. Dynasties fractured under the weight of their own ambition. Brothers turned on brothers, sons poisoned fathers, generals betrayed kings. The blood that once bound the empire together became poison, tearing it apart from within. Civil war, corruption, and greed crept through the marble veins of power, corroding what no enemy could touch. And then came the decay of stone. Great temples that once gleamed in the sunlight grew dark with neglect. Walls that once stood proud against invaders crumbled into dust. Statues that once looked defiantly into the future lost their faces, their features weathered by wind and rain. What had been built to last forever began to dissolve, as if the earth itself was reclaiming what had been stolen from it. Imagine walking the avenues once alive with triumph. Where drums thundered, there is only silence. Where banners once tapped proudly in the wind, there are only fragments, fluttering like dying whispers. The voices of emperors that once shook the world have faded, their boasts reduced to echoes among the ruins. What was once unshakable became fragile. What was once immortal proved mortal after all. And so the illusion shattered, bloodlines ended, stones collapsed, and the empire fell. All the glory, all the sacrifice, all the suffering, it seemed to vanish into nothing. The eternal empire was eternal no longer. Time had claimed its prize. But here lies the cruel irony. It was not enemies that destroyed it, nor gods, nor fate. It was itself. For an empire that feeds on blood eventually chokes upon it. An empire that builds upon suffering eventually sinks beneath its weight. And an empire that believes it can defy time inevitably falls to it. And yet something lingers. Though the palaces are dust, though the banners are gone, though the emperors lie forgotten in unmarked graves, the ruins remain. Broken columns, shattered statues, eroded walls, they whisper in the wind, reminding us of what once was. They are fragments of eternity, shards of ambition that refuse to disappear. This is the fragile illusion of immortality. The empire sought to bind itself to time, but time is unbound. What remains is not eternal dominion, but memory. A shadow of greatness, a warning of hubris. Blood dries. Stone crumbles, and even the mightiest must bow before the march of centuries. The empire of blood and stone promised forever, but forever is a dream, and dreams, no matter how magnificent, fade. What is left are ruins, and the question they leave behind, was the cost worth it? And yet, though its banners are gone, though its palaces are rubble, the empire of blood and stone has not vanished entirely. It lingers like a shadow at the edge of memory, like a voice carried on the wind. For even in ruin it speaks, even in silence it whispers. And those whispers reach us still, across the gulf of centuries. We walk among its remains, broken columns jutting from the earth like the bones of giants. Roads, once pulsing with the march of legions, now overgrown with grass, their stones uneven, yet still stubbornly enduring. Amphitheatres where crowds once roared now stand in eerie silence, their empty seats holding only the echo of a forgotten cheer. And yet there is power in these ruins, a haunting power, for they remind us that greatness is not eternal, but its memory is. The empire carved itself into history, not only through conquest, but through the lessons it left behind. We still feel its presence, in the languages we speak, in the laws we obey, in the architecture that shapes our cities. Its shadow stretches than its armies have. And with that shadow comes a question. What will we do with the inheritance it left us? For in the Empire's story lies both warning and inspiration. It shows us the heights to which ambition can soar and the depths to which cruelty can sink. It reminds us that power without mercy breeds ruin, and that stone without compassion crumbles as swiftly as sand. But it also reveals something unbreakable in the human spirit, the drive to build, to dream, to carve our names into the vastness of time itself. The ruins are not only relics, they are mirrors. When we look upon them, we do not simply see the past. We see ourselves. We see our hunger for greatness, our desire for permanence, our struggle to leave behind more than dust. The Empire's story is our story, for every generation builds its own monuments, sheds its own blood, and reaches for its own eternity. But will we learn? That is the true question. The empire of blood and stone beguiled, and its arrogance it fell. We too raise monuments, we too wage wars, we too sacrifice the many for the dreams of the few. And if we are not careful, our empires, be they of steel or glass, of flesh or idea, may meet the same fate. Still, there is hope in the echo, for in ruins there is remembrance, wisdom. The empire whispers to us not only of what was lost, but of what can be saved, if we listen, if we learn, if we dare to build differently. So let's stand among the broken stones, hear the voices carried by the wind, and understand this. Blood dries, stone crumbles, but the story endures. And in that story lies a choice for our time, for the empires we will one day leave behind. So now, as we stand in the shadow of ruins and listen to the whispers of stone, we must ask ourselves, what kind of empire shall we build? For history is not a tale long dead. It is a mirror held before us, a mirror of ambition, of triumph, of failure. The empire of blood and stone shows us the cost of arrogance, the price of cruelty, the futility of believing in forever. Yet it also shows us the power of human will, the fire that drives us to create, to endure, to leave a mark upon the world. The choice is ours. We may follow the same path, raising monuments upon suffering, chasing eternity through conquest, only to watch it all collapse into dust. Or we may learn. We may build not upon the blood of the weak, but upon the strength of compassion, not in cold, unyielding stone, but in the living legacy of justice, memory, and truth. The empire of blood and stone has fallen, its banners rot, its palaces are silent, its gods are forgotten, but we remain. And within us lies the same hunger, the same fire, the same unrelenting desire to carve our place in time. The question is not whether we will build, but how. So let the ruins speak, let them guide us. Let them remind us that true immortality is not found in marble or in conquest, but in the lives we touch, the legacies we honor, the wisdom we carry forward. For if we listen to the whispers of the past, we may yet shape a future where greatness is not born of blood, nor bound in stone, but forged in the living heart of humanity itself.